America's first 3 Apollo astronauts were trapped and killed by a flash fire that swept their moonship early tonight during a launch pad test at Cape Kennedy in Florida.
Hey! Oh, no fire in the cockpit! Buzz, can you read it? Can you get him out of there?
In the 1960s, NASA was racing to land a man on the moon, with Apollo 1 as a crucial step towards that goal. Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were set to lead the mission, but on January 27, 1967, a setback struck. A sudden incident engulfed their command module during a routine test, claiming their lives. For some, this was a bit too suspicious, especially after Thomas Barron got involved and what happened to him and his family. So let's keep an open mind and see the dark side of NASA.
Hey, we got fire in the cockpit.
On January 27, 1967, astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were conducting a pre-launch test inside the Apollo 1 command module. The spacecraft's cabin was filled with pure oxygen at a pressure higher than atmospheric levels, a standard practice intended to simulate space conditions. This environment, however, was highly flammable. During the test, an electrical malfunction is believed to have caused a spark, which quickly ignited the oxygen-rich atmosphere with the crew still inside. They were unable to open the hatch, and sadly, all 3 astronauts lost their lives. But all of this could have been avoided because Grissom had notoriously criticized the craft, saying this was not ready for flight, let alone be able to go in space. So was he silenced? Let's look at the evidence. Gus Grissom was a seasoned astronaut who had been openly critical of NASA's equipment leading up to the mission. He expressed concerns about the spacecraft's design and safety, highlighting issues he believed could jeopardize the mission. Grissom's apprehensions were well known within NASA, and he was vocal about the need for improvements. In a symbolic act of protest, he hung a lemon, a symbol of a defective product, on the Apollo 1 simulator, signaling his dissatisfaction with the spacecraft's condition. Not listening to his warnings caused that incident, and it led to many conspiracies. The loss of the Apollo 1 crew led many to say that Grissom's outspoken criticism made him a target, suggesting that the incident was not merely a result of technical failures, but a deliberate act to silence dissent within NASA. Others said that it was orchestrated as a stark warning, ensuring compliance and caution within the space agency. These theories have persisted, fueled by the circumstances surrounding the incident and Grissom's prior warnings. Adding to the mystery was Thomas Barron, a name that NASA and people worldwide would never forget. He was a safety inspector who had been investigating the Apollo program after the 1967 tragic failed launch. Barron compiled a detailed report alleging severe mismanagement and safety violations within NASA, which he presented to Congress. But before his findings could be fully explored, something mysterious happened. But before we look into his case, we need to look at why this space race even began, and it's more complicated than you have been told. Moon race, reality or propaganda? In the 1960s, the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a fierce competition known as the Cold War. This rivalry extended beyond politics and military might, reaching into the realm of space exploration. The US was determined to show its superiority by achieving a monumental feat, landing a man on the moon. But as we delve deeper, questions arise about the authenticity of this endeavor.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
The space race was more than just a quest for knowledge. It was a strategic move to demonstrate technological and ideological dominance, achieve significant milestones, including launching the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, in 1957 and sending the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space in 1961. These achievements put immense pressure on the US to surpass its rival. President John F. Kennedy's bold proclamation in 1961 to land a man on the moon before the decade's end was a direct response to this challenge. However, the ambitious timeline and the complexities involved raised concerns about the feasibility of such a mission.
This is Space Conquerors Park, a few hundred miles south of Moscow. It's a celebration of Russia's achievements in space exploration. And the reason the park was built here is that 60 years ago, this place became part of a remarkable story.
The Apollo 1 incident in January 1967, which resulted in the loss of astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, highlighted significant flaws in NASA's spacecraft design and safety protocols. Yet, remarkably, just over 2 years later, in July 1969, NASA claimed to have successfully landed Apollo 11 on the moon. This rapid turnaround from a fatal incident to a flawless mission has led some to question the authenticity of the moon landing. Critics argue that the technological hurdles, coupled with the limited time frame, made such a swift recovery improbable. Either this success was a genuine triumph of human ingenuity, or it was a carefully crafted narrative to assert US dominance during the Cold War. NASA erases proof.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
Adding to the skepticism is the curious case of the missing Apollo 11 telemetry data and engineering schematics. NASA has acknowledged that the original magnetic tapes containing the raw video footage of the first moonwalk were destroyed by NASA and reused during the 1980s, a standard practice at the time due to the high cost of tapes. Additionally, detailed engineering schematics of the lunar module and other critical components are reportedly missing or unavailable. For an achievement of such magnitude, the loss of these invaluable records is perplexing. Some suggest that this absence of primary evidence conveniently prevents independent verification of the moon landing's authenticity. This might be merely a bureaucratic oversight, or there was a deliberate attempt to obscure the truth. Curious case of Barron.
Has there been any pressure on you by NASA?
Nothing. We were, my wife and I were somewhat harassed at home when this first thing broke some time back.
In the aftermath of the Apollo 1 incident, Thomas Barron, a safety inspector for North American Aviation, emerged as a vocal critic of NASA's practices. He compiled a comprehensive report detailing safety violations and mismanagement within the Apollo program. Barron testified before Congress, presenting his findings and expressing concerns about the program's direction. But just a week after his testimony, Barron, along with his family, mysteriously passed away. The timing and circumstances of this incident fueled more speculation, and now conspiracy theorists had a loaded arsenal. It might be a mere coincidence, but when coincidences start piling up, they end up being less and less believable. Thomas Barron was a whistleblower who was about to expose everything, so silencing him seemed like the only option. And his family? They were either in the wrong place at the wrong time, or as the saying goes, no loose ends. These anomalies and unexplained events aren't only exclusive to Apollo 1, but other space missions as well. And it goes without saying that Apollo 11 has seen its fair share of conspiracies and criticism.
I believe that Thomas Ronald Barron was murdered because he had the truth to tell about the Apollo project.
Apollo 11. The 1969 Apollo 11 mission is celebrated as a monumental achievement in human history, marking the first time humans set foot on the lunar surface. However, skeptics have long questioned the authenticity of this event, proposing that the moon landing was an elaborate fabrication. Central to this theory is the alleged involvement of filmmaker Stanley Kubrick, known for his groundbreaking 1968 film 2001: A Space Odyssey, which showed remarkably realistic depictions of space. A space conspiracy.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question.
Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey was lauded for its advanced special effects and accurate portrayal of space travel. Conspiracy theorists suggest that Kubrick's expertise in creating lifelike space scenes led NASA to enlist his help in staging the moon landing.
I believe, had they wanted to, that NASA could indeed have pulled off the greatest hoax of all time, never sent anyone to the moon, and recreated it in a television studio.
They argue that the technological limitations of the 1960s made a successful manned lunar mission improbable, and that a simulated landing would serve to fulfill President John F. Kennedy's 1961 promise to land a man on the moon before the decade's end.
Exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not, and it is one of the great adventures of all time. And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind.
This theory has some weight to it because of this picture. On the far right is George Mueller, NASA's then senior administrator of Apollo missions. Then in the middle it's Stanley with a sci-fi writer, Arthur C. Clarke. On the left is NASA astronaut Deke Slayton, and on the far left in white is NASA advisor Frederick Ordway on a movie set. They claim that the same techniques used in 2001, A Space Odyssey, were employed to create convincing footage of astronauts on the lunar surface. Additionally, some theorists highlight perceived connections between Kubrick and NASA, suggesting that the filmmaker had access to advanced technology and information that facilitated the alleged hoax.
Up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics.
Suspicious footage. Several anomalies in the Apollo 11 footage have been cited as evidence supporting the hoax theory, starting with this one. One of the most frequently mentioned details is the American flag waving on the moon's surface. In the footage, the flag appears to wave or ripple, which skeptics argue should be impossible in the vacuum of space, where there is no air or wind. They suggest that this movement indicates the presence of atmospheric conditions, consistent with a terrestrial studio setting. Multiple light sources. Another point of contention involves the shadows visible in lunar photographs. Critics note that the shadows cast by astronauts and objects on the moon's surface appear to fall at inconsistent angles, which they argue could result from artificial lighting used in a studio. In natural sunlight, shadows should run parallel, so these discrepancies raise questions about the authenticity of the images. Starless night.
I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
Observers have also pointed out the absence of stars in the lunar sky in both photographs and video footage. Given the lack of atmosphere on the moon, stars should be highly visible, but lack of stars was a deliberate move to prevent astronomers from analyzing star patterns to verify the landing's location or to expose inconsistencies. Counter arguments.
That the star positions were not those that would have appeared in a photograph taken from the moon. It's another case where they could not fake it, so they simply ignored it.
While these points have fueled speculation, NASA scientists and apologists have provided explanations addressing these anomalies. NASA has explained that the flag's movement was due to the momentum imparted during its placement. The flagpole was designed with a horizontal crossbar to display the flag fully, and the rippling effect occurred because the fabric was disturbed during setup and continued to move in the low-gravity environment. As for inconsistent shadows, the uneven lunar terrain caused shadows to appear at different angles. Additionally, wide-angle lens distortion and the moon's reflective surface can contribute to the perceived inconsistencies in shadow direction. But the trickiest to answer was the absence of stars. NASA said the cameras used during the Apollo missions were set with fast exposure times to capture the brightly lit lunar surface, which resulted in the relatively dim stars not appearing in the photographs. The theory that the Apollo 11 moon landing was a studio production, possibly involving Stanley Kubrick, remains a topic of debate among conspiracy theorists, while various anomalies in the footage have been highlighted as evidence of a hoax, like transparent wires and slowing down recording speed during post-production. Some of these points have been addressed with plausible explanations, but what if the people that landed on the moon said something they shouldn't have? Buzz Aldrin's confrontation.
You swore on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
I'm not trying to get in the middle of anything.
You tell him to get out of here?
This is a hotel.
We'll call the police.
In 2002, Buzz Aldrin, the second person to walk on the moon, was confronted by Bart Sibrel, a filmmaker known for his belief that the moon landings were staged. Sibrel accosted Aldrin outside a Beverly Hills hotel, demanding he swear on a Bible that he had been to the moon and calling him a liar. The encounter escalated and the question remains unanswered. This incident has been interpreted in various ways. Some view Aldrin's reaction as a natural response to provocation, while others see it as indicative of deeper tensions. Skeptics question why a renowned astronaut would respond so aggressively to mere accusations, suggesting that such behavior might hint at underlying guilt or frustration over concealed truths.
You're the one who said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle black, if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself.
Away from me?
NASA's mismanagement.
You're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
A significant point of contention is NASA's admission that the original recordings of the Apollo 11 moon landing were inadvertently erased and reused. In the early 1980s, as part of a data tape recycling program, the tapes containing the raw unprocessed Apollo 11 slow scan television (SSTV) signal were erased. This action has been attributed to standard tape reuse practices at the time. Critics argue that such a monumental achievement should have warranted meticulous preservation. The loss of these original tapes has led to speculation about the potential motives behind their erasure. Some theorists propose that the destruction was deliberate, aiming to eliminate evidence that could expose inconsistencies or fabrication in the moon landing footage. Astronauts' secrecy.
With us, a group of students among America's best. To you, we say, we have only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone.
Another aspect that has fueled skepticism is the perceived reluctance of Apollo astronauts to discuss their lunar experiences in detail. While some astronauts have been forthcoming, others have exhibited a notable hesitancy. This reticence has been interpreted by some as discomfort stemming from the burden of maintaining a fabricated narrative. For instance, during post-mission press conferences, some astronauts appeared uneasy or evasive when questioned about specific details of their journey. If someone achieves something of this caliber that is to this date unparalleled, that person would be over the moon and quick to share all the details. This was allegedly one of humanity's greatest feats, if not the greatest. They suggest that the reluctance to engage in detailed discussions is to avoid any lies or inconsistencies spoken by astronauts. The incidents involving Buzz Aldrin's confrontation, NASA's erasure of original Apollo 11 footage, and the astronauts' reluctance to discuss their experiences in depth contribute to ongoing debates about the authenticity of the moon landings. Apollo abrupt end.
Hey, when he hits the craters and starts bouncing is when he gets his rooster tail. He makes sharp turns. Hey, that was a good stop. Those wheels just locked. Mark off.
The Apollo program was one of the most ambitious projects in human history. If NASA had truly mastered moon landings, why did they stop at Apollo 17 in 1972? With so much left to explore, why has no human set foot on the lunar surface in over 50 years? NASA's official explanation cites budget cuts and shifting priorities, but skeptics argue that the real reason may be far more concerning.
They want 4 minutes worth, John.
Why stop at Apollo 17? Between 1969 and 1972, 6 Apollo missions allegedly landed on the moon. Each mission was a massive technological feat, showcasing America's supposed dominance in the space race. Yet despite these apparent successes, NASA abruptly canceled Apollo 18, 19, and 20. Officially, the reasoning was budget constraints, but this doesn't add up. At its peak, NASA's budget was about 4.5% of the US federal budget. By the time of the Apollo program's cancellation, NASA's funding had decreased, but it still received billions of dollars annually. If moon landings were as safe and routine as NASA claimed, why wouldn't they continue? Why abandon what was arguably the most significant achievement in human history? Additionally, no country, not even the Soviet Union, which was competing fiercely in the space race, has attempted to send humans to the moon since. Was it because they knew something the public didn't? The deadly barrier. One of the most controversial aspects of the Apollo missions is the Van Allen radiation belt. This is a region of intense radiation surrounding Earth, consisting of high-energy particles trapped by the planet's magnetic field. Scientists have long debated whether humans could pass through the belt unharmed. The Apollo astronauts supposedly did so without issue, despite traveling in a thinly shielded spacecraft. Yet modern NASA engineers acknowledge that radiation remains a major obstacle to deep space travel. In a 2014 NASA video discussing the Orion program, NASA's next-generation deep space mission, an engineer states, "We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space." That doesn't add up. Didn't Apollo solve this issue in the 1960s? If NASA successfully sent astronauts through the radiation belt more than 50 years ago, why are they still trying to figure it out? Maybe this is why NASA doesn't allow people to talk freely. What really happened? Critics argue that the Apollo program ended not because of budget cuts, but because NASA had exhausted its ability to sustain the illusion. The first few moon landings, if faked, might have been easy to control. However, with growing public interest and advancing technology, maintaining a hoax indefinitely would have been impossible. As technology improved, independent researchers would soon be able to scrutinize lunar claims more closely. Perhaps NASA feared exposure. Instead of risking further questions, they wrapped up the Apollo program and shifted public attention elsewhere. The Van Allen belt issue raises another unsettling question. If Apollo astronauts truly went to the moon, did they find something there that made NASA retreat permanently? Some theorists speculate that extraterrestrial activity or classified discoveries forced NASA to shut down lunar exploration. Regardless of what you believe, the fact remains. After Apollo 17, NASA abandoned human moon landings. No astronaut has ventured beyond low Earth orbit since. Does that seem logical for a space agency that supposedly conquered the moon half a century ago? The Apollo program's sudden end remains one of the biggest red flags in the moon landing debate. Budget concerns alone don't justify abandoning such a monumental endeavor. Meanwhile, NASA's struggle with radiation shielding contradicts the supposed success of Apollo. As we continue this documentary, we'll dive deeper into the unanswered questions and inconsistencies that keep the Apollo mystery alive. Stay tuned. Belief versus doubt.
Now it is time to take longer strides. Time for a great new American enterprise. Time for this nation to take a clearly leading role.
The Apollo moon landings remain one of the most celebrated achievements in human history. For many, they symbolize the triumph of science, technology, and human ingenuity. Yet for others, they represent one of the greatest deceptions ever pulled off. Decades after the first moon landing, the debate continues between those who trust the official narrative and those who question everything. So where does the truth lie? Are the Apollo landings a testament to mankind's capabilities, or are they a carefully constructed illusion meant to serve a deeper agenda? Let's examine both sides and let the facts speak for themselves. Experts defending the landings. NASA, scientists, and aerospace engineers have spent years refuting conspiracy claims, providing technical explanations for every alleged inconsistency. Here are some key points experts present. The waving flag. Scientists explained that the flag appears to wave because it was attached to a horizontal rod, and when the astronauts adjusted it, it moved due to inertia. Since there is no air resistance on the moon, it continued to move slightly. Shadows and lighting. Experts claim that the odd angles of shadows in moon landing photos result from the rugged lunar surface and perspective distortions, not from studio lighting. No stars in the sky. Astronauts used cameras with fast exposure settings to capture clear images of the moon's surface. Since stars are faint compared to the bright lunar ground, they were not visible in the photos. Van Allen radiation belt. NASA argues that the Apollo spacecraft passed through the radiation belt quickly, minimizing exposure. The aluminum shielding supposedly protected astronauts from harmful doses. Moon rocks as proof of Apollo missions brought back 842 pounds of moon rocks, which have been analyzed by scientists worldwide and confirmed to be extraterrestrial in origin. If the landings were fake, how did NASA obtain these rocks? The experts stand firm. Apollo was real and the evidence proves it, but does it? Theorists pointing out inconsistencies. While NASA presents logical arguments, skeptics argue that too many questions remain unanswered. Lost tapes and missing blueprints. The original Apollo 11 telemetry data and engineering schematics are missing. Why would NASA lose such crucial records of one of history's greatest achievements? The Cold War context.
Hello there, from the men in the moon.
The moon landing occurred during the height of the US-Soviet space race. The US needed a victory to assert dominance. Would they have faked the landing to outmaneuver the Soviet?
Hello there, from the men in the moon.
Buzz Aldrin's aggression and strange comment.
There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours.
Aldrin punched a man for questioning the landings and later made cryptic statements about a monolith on Mars. Was he hiding something?
That goes around Mars once in 7 hours.
NASA's modern contradictions.
conspiracy theorists see that as evidence that we didn't go to the moon, that it was staged, and the opposite point of view is that it's a case of bad editing.
In recent interviews, NASA engineers state that they are still trying to figure out how to send humans beyond low Earth orbit. If we successfully landed on the moon in the 1960s, why is this still a challenge today? The skeptics present compelling arguments, raising doubts that refuse to fade. Bigger question. Whether the Apollo moon landings were real or staged, the bigger question remains, what else has been hidden from the public? If NASA faked the moon landing, what was their true motive? Political gain. If the landings were fabricated, they served as a major propaganda victory, cementing the US as the undisputed leader in space exploration. Could NASA have developed secret propulsion technologies that were never revealed? Extraterrestrial discoveries. Some theorists suggest that the moon landings might have revealed something NASA didn't want the public to know, evidence of otherworldly beings or ancient structures on the lunar surface. Regardless of what one chooses to believe, the debate surrounding the Apollo program is far from over. The only thing we know for certain is that history, as told by governments and institutions, is not always as straightforward as it seems. The real truth. The Apollo program stands at a crossroads of history, either a groundbreaking achievement or the most elaborate deception ever created. From the Apollo 1 incident, where whistleblowers like Gus Grissom and Thomas Barron met suspicious ends, to the moon landing itself, filled with inconsistencies, missing tapes, improbable timelines, and questionable footage. Theories of Hollywood-style fakery, Cold War propaganda, and NASA's own contradictions only deepen the mystery. Experts defend the landings with scientific explanations, yet skeptics present undeniable gaps in the official narrative. If Apollo was real, why haven't we returned? If it was faked, what was the true purpose? So I present you with the final question. Was Apollo mankind's greatest step forward or a well-crafted illusion? The truth is in front of you. One is more believable and the other exposes the facts. What does your heart tell you? Thank you very much for watching the video. Share in the comments and do like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to not miss any of the upcoming amazing videos. Thank you once again,